The history of money. Hello there, history nauts. Money. We use it every single day. But have you ever stopped to wonder, where did it come from? When you stop to think about it, it's really weird that we humans swap expensive things for paper, metal, and numbers. Well, trade between humans has been around as long as we humans have. Long before money even existed, people traded goods and services directly. I'll trade you an axe for some meat, a fish for some bread, a pair of shoes for wheat. A loose form of currency slowly developed over the centuries that involved easily traded items, things that had worth, animal skins, salt. The Romans used to pay their soldiers in salt. That's where the word salary comes from. Weapons even. This is all well and good, and bartering for items still exists today. But if you had a cow and I had a sheep, we'd just trade. Simple. However, this system had one major flaw. What if I don't need a cow? What if I need a hammer? This is the problem with bartering. It's inefficient, not scalable, and people soon started looking for a better way to make exchanges. Among other countries around the world, seashells were the earliest objects used as currency in China. They were similar in size, small, and durable. The problem with using objects from nature, though, is there's nothing to stop people from amassing the large amount. Chinese people began to imitate them, using stones and animal bones, later even casting them in copper. Even today, the Chinese character for precious is derived from shell. Another problem with using something like shells is there's no agreed system, making trade with other people tricky. Over in Mesopotamia now, which is known as the cradle of civilization, around 5,000 years ago, the first forms of money started to appear. The Sumerians used silver as a form of trade, and it came in all shapes and sizes. Lumps, cut pieces, ingots, bars, and coil. It wasn't the shape that was important, but the weight. It was called a shekel, a unit of weight equivalent to around 8.33 grams of silver. Around 600 BC in Lydia, modern-day Turkey, King Elatius minted the first official currency. The Lydian Empire will go on to become one of the richest to ever exist. The king's son Croesus would become famous for his wealth. The coins were made from electrum, a mixture of silver and gold that occurs naturally. These coins made trade a lot easier, and they were stamped with symbols or images to prove they were real. Basically an ancient security feature. Because these coins were made of a precious metal, they still had an inherent value. Even if you weren't from Lydia, you could still melt them down if needed. The Tang Dynasty in China, around the 7th century. Here, something revolutionary happened. Paper money. The concept of paper money started as a kind of receipt for merchants who stored their goods with government-backed warehouses. They called this fly money. The benefits of paper money were easy to see. Metal coins were heavy, weighing up to 11 kilograms per 1,000. So if you were selling a horse for 20,000 coins, the payment would be so heavy, you'd need the horse you just sold to transport the money. Moving large amounts of money in coin was a slow and conspicuous process. It often attracted unwanted attention. Paper money allowed you to transport paper money quietly and quickly. It was so popular that the Mongol Yuan dynasty ended up banning coins altogether. Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, explorer, and writer who traveled through Asia along the Silk Road, visited China in approximately 1271, reporting in his book that all these pieces of paper are issued with as much solemnity and authority as if they were of pure gold or silver. Paper money comes with its own problems, forgery and inflation. In fact, in the place where modern American bills say, "In God we trust," the Chinese inscription at that time warned, "Those who are counterfeiting will be beheaded." This didn't dissuade forgers, though, and problems with counterfeiting and overissuance of the notes convinced the Ming dynasty to briefly discontinue the use of paper money by 1455. The idea of paper money was so revolutionary that it spread across the globe. Europe didn't catch on until the 17th century, but by then it was clear. Paper was cheaper and more portable than metal coins. Banks eventually started using paper banknotes for depositors and borrowers to carry around in place of metal coins. These notes could be taken to the bank at any time in exchange for their face value in metal, usually in silver or gold coins. As economies grew more complex, the need for banks and financial institutions became critical. In medieval Italy, merchant families like the Medicis developed the first banks. They introduced things like loans, credit, and bills of exchange, basically laying the groundwork for modern banking. They used their financial power to finance many great achievements and were patrons of Brunelleschi, Botticelli, Machiavelli, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello, among many others in the arts and sciences. Banking got even more sophisticated during the Renaissance, and by the 1600s, the world saw the birth of the first official stock exchange in Amsterdam. Started in 1602, it was created to sell the Dutch East India Company's shares to help fund the 80 Years' War, where the Dutch were fighting for independence from Spain. The idea was an investor would buy shares in the company, and in turn, they would receive a guarantee of some future share of profits. Soon, stock markets were popping up all over Europe, allowing people to buy and sell shares in companies. The idea of investing in businesses became an essential part of the global economy. The banking systems we know today continue to evolve through the centuries, although they were plagued by crises. The main problem was banknotes, trading solely on confidence and trust, didn't match up with the quantity of gold the banks possessed, leading to crisis after crisis as banks failed when too many people wanted their money back at the same time. In the UK in 1717, Sir Isaac Newton, as Master of the Mint, made the mistake of setting the exchange rate of silver to gold too low, causing silver coins to go out of circulation, leaving only gold. From then on, the UK was on an unofficial gold standard for the next 104 years. In 1821, though, after the Napoleonic Wars were won, the UK needed a more stable currency for their growing economy, and so officially used the gold standard for its money. 50 years later, a newly unified Germany, benefiting from reparations paid by France following the Franco-Prussian War, took steps which essentially put it on a gold standard too. The impact of Germany's decision, along with the economic dominance of the UK and the attraction of accessing London's financial markets, made other countries turn to gold. By 1900, all countries apart from China and some Central American countries were on a gold standard. The idea was that paper money should be backed by something real, giving people confidence in their currency. But it didn't last long. The system was largely abandoned at the outbreak of World War I, as nations needed the flexibility to print money to finance their war efforts. There were attempts to restore the gold standard after the war. Britain returned to it in 1925, but they tried returning to the same pre-war rate before they had a huge surplus of notes they'd printed to fight the war. It didn't go well. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression struck. High unemployment, poverty, and a drastic reduction in production and trade. The gold standard made things worse as it prevented central banks from expanding the money supply to stimulate their economies. One by one, countries left the gold standard. At the end of the Second World War, though, with America newly emerged as a superpower, the Bretton Woods system was introduced, a kind of giant gold standard. It attached all world currencies to the US dollar, which in turn was the only currency which could be converted to gold, putting America firmly in control of the world's economy. Another game changer, credit cards. Introduced in the 1950s, they gave people the ability to buy now, pay later. What's more, they fueled the rise of the consumer economy we know and live in today. Then, in 1971, President Richard Nixon officially ended the gold standard in the United States, and the world's currencies were free-floating from then on, in what's known as a fiat economy. And that's the system we still use today, meaning governments are free to print as much money as they want and say how much it's worth. But we're not done yet. Enter cryptocurrency. In 2009, a mysterious figure named Satoshi Nakamoto launched Bitcoin, the world's first decentralized digital currency. There's some rumors, but no one knows who it is. Rather than use a central authority like a bank to check, approve, and process transactions, it uses a decentralized system. Whenever a transaction occurs, individual nodes on the internet check and authorize that it's legitimate. Once they've all agreed amongst themselves that the transaction is genuine, it's approved, then recorded on the blockchain with encryption. The beauty of this technology is no one person is in control. Since then, other cryptocurrencies have popped up, and they're challenging traditional notions of what money is. So, there we have it. What a ride! From caveman trading meat and axes to the incredibly complex worldwide financial system we live in today. History really is incredible. Remember, you've got to know where you come from to know where you're going. Until the next time.